Jennifer from Fiber Flux. Welcome to the 2019 Fiber Flux Temperature Project. We do a temperature project every year. Actually, last year was our first temperature project, so this is actually the second annual temperature project. And this year we're going to be doing a blanket. Last year we did a shawl, and I just did the wrap-up post for that, so if you want to check that out, I'll put the link down below for that. But so many of you made such beautiful projects, and I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit this year and do a blanket. So we're going to be making lots of little tiny granny motifs, and we're going to be joining them together with a common color. Now, once again, I've created a little tool that you can use to get the temperature ranges and the colors, and we're going to be going through that a little bit more later on in this video, and I'm going to be showing you kind of how to put it together. And also, I wanted to give you an example. I've started some of the squares. I don't normally like to start the temperature projects the very first week of the year because I like to get a little bit going to show you, and you can have a little bit to work on. If we start on the very first day, it's kind of hard to show you examples. So I waited till the second week of the year to kind of launch this project. But we're going to be making little tiny granny squares. Now this is an example of one of them. And now obviously you can kind of take this in any direction you like, but I have decided to do the average daily this time. Now last year we did the average weekly, and we did one row per week. This time we're going to make one motif per day. So it's going to be a beautiful large blanket of lots of different motifs and lots of different colors. So the center of each square will be the high for the day, and the outer round will be the low for the day. So each square will have two colors, and then we're going to be using white yarn or whatever color you like to kind of join all the squares together. So I have this beautiful kind of rainbow spectrum of motifs at the end of the year. Now I'm going to show you in this part of the video, we're going to talk about supplies and the tools you'll need. We're going to talk about the yarn colors. We're going to talk about the temperature spectrum. I'm going to show you how to create and kind of plan your blanket on graph paper, each block representing a motif, and then also how to organize your project on the calendar and how to mark it, how to mark the highs and the lows, and how to translate them into the color that you'll be needing. Finally, because these temperature projects use so many different colors of yarn, we have several tools. I'm going to show you how to kind of organize your yarn into a bin and how to access it easily throughout the year. So without further ado, let's jump right into the supplies. Now stay tuned because we are going to have a part 2 of our temperature project tomorrow, and that we're going to be doing the actual tutorial part. So we're going to have a combination. Now let me just grab one here of solid squares, and they'll represent the beginning of every month and the close of the year. And we'll talk about all this a little bit more in just a moment. But we're also going to have two color squares. So we're going to have solid squares and multicolor squares, and they're just slightly different in how you make them. So stay tuned. Tomorrow we're going to learn how to make both of these types of squares, and I'm also going to show you how to join some of these together. Now that part is especially important because you're going to want to know how to work on your blanket throughout the year. Now, as always with these temperature projects, we do a spring update, a summer update, a fall update, a winter update, and then we kind of wrap up the project at the end of the year. But the join as you go part is especially because this is the second week of the year. We're going to have some squares to kind of work with and learn how to join them together. Also, if you're not part of our Ravelry crochet along, join that, because that is a wonderful community of makers who are also doing the crochet along, and you'll learn some tips and tricks that other people are discovering, and it's a place to show off your work. If you kind of get stuck and need some help, it's a wonderful place to kind of hang out with other people who are working on the same project. So let's jump right in and just get started with supplies, organization, and some of the tools that you'll need as well. Okay, so I have all of our supplies all laid out, and as you can see, the supplies are pretty minimal, but we have lots of yarn, and that's because we're going to use lots of colors for this project. So I have the yarn laid out in order, and as you can see, I am using some things from my stash. You can see there's just a little bit of yellow here. We're going to be using Red Heart Super Saver again, but that being said, so many of you chose different palettes and different yarn and different weights and things like that, so feel free to experiment a little bit, use some things you may have on hand. I love using the Red Heart Super Saver for a couple reasons. The first is it comes in tons and tons of different colors, and that way you can get a really nice full spectrum, and you can go in other directions as well with your color palette. And I did a very similar spectrum with a few differences that we had from last year. The other reason why I love Red Heart Super Saver is that I mentioned I used some scraps from my stash. So I have just a little bit of yellow here. Now, Super Saver doesn't have dye lots, so when I run out of this, I can simply go to the store, buy some more bright yellow, and all will be well, and it'll look fine. Another reason why I choose the Super Saver is because whenever I'm making blankets and things, I love being able to throw them in the wash. And this yarn is machine washable. A lot of times these things end up on the floor or get dragged through the house and what have you. So we're going to use the Red Heart Super Saver. I'm going to stick with the recommended hook size for this yarn. And if we look at one of these labels here, the Red Heart Super Saver recommends the 5.5 millimeter eye crochet hook and is a 4 medium on the yarn weight scale. So if you need to substitute, or maybe you have all the colors except for orange and you have it in a different brand or something like that, just know that the 4 medium and the eye 5.5 millimeter crochet hook size recommendation. And again, if you need to change some of these things, that's okay. Just know that your blanket dimensions will change as well. So on that note, we're going to use the 5.5 millimeter eye crochet hook, a pair of scissors, and a tapestry needle when we weave in the ends. Now I'm going to show you how to weave the ends in as you go along, so it'll eliminate a lot of that, because we're going to have a ton of squares, we're going to have lots of ends, lots of colors, lots of squares, lots of ends. So this will come in handy as well. So as you can see, the tools are very minimal here. Now later I'm going to show you how to organize your project, and we're going to use some pens and highlighters and things like that too, but you know, if you have a pen, that would be helpful as well. So let's talk about the colors we have here. And as we talk about organizing our project, we are going to make a little reference chart that we can use in conjunction with some of these other tools. So we have, again, it's all Red Heart Super Saver, and if you're looking for it, it's readily available. It comes in tons and tons of colors, and you can use the same palette I have here, or you can switch it up a bit. It's totally up to you. So let's start from this side and work our way down. We have here the cherry red, the shocking pink, the perfect pink, pumpkin, bright yellow, spring green, turquoise, delft blue, lavender, orchid, and white. Now, these colors, there are several different shades of yellow in the Super Saver. There's a couple of oranges, a couple of greens, etc. If you want to kind of change the shades of each color, that's totally fine. You could go for more muted versions of this. You could go for some of the neons, you could do variegated, etc., etc. So it's very flexible, and it's really, really fun to see what everybody kind of comes up with. So now that we know the supplies we're going to be using, let's talk about organizing our project. So whenever you have a large project like this that happens over many, many months, we're going to have a large blanket by the time we're finished this with lots of squares. It's good to organize. And when you're making many, many parts, because we're doing a square per day, we're going to need to know how many we've done, how many we have to do, what colors the squares need to be. And when you're maybe crocheting in July, for example, in the middle of the year and you're halfway through your blanket, you don't necessarily want to sit down to crochet and count, you know, 100 or 150 or 200 squares every time you sit down to crochet. So a couple things I like to use. I found there is a really great website where you can punch in the number of squares and make your own custom grid paper. I will put the link down below. It's a free tool online, and you can put how many squares across and how many squares down and how big you want each square to be, and it'll generate a piece of grid paper for you, and you can print it on your computer. And again, I'll put the link to that below, and you can customize it. So we have some grid paper. So as we complete each square, what I'm going to do is take a highlighter and just color it in, okay? If you're doing the charity crochet along with me, the challenge, we're kind of doing the same concept as well. So I'm just going to put this aside for one moment. And we're also, let me just grab it real quick over here, going to use this chart here. Now I'm going to show you how to set yours up if you'd like to do the same thing. I just simply made a little table, and I put all of our temperatures, which we're going to talk about in more detail, and I put each color that corresponds with each temperature, and we'll go over that in just a moment. And I'm going to teach you how to set this up as well. The other thing I did that I did last year, but not in as much detail, because we did the average daily temperature, or excuse me, average weekly temperature. I had a less detailed calendar, but still, having a calendar really helps. So what I did was, there's this really great website called timeanddate.com, and I'll put the link down below for that as well. But this is a website I've used for years. This is not sponsored or anything like that. This is just a website I enjoy using. But you can create custom calendars. You can do a year calendar, a month calendar, and it'll generate a PDF for you. It's kind of like another online tool. So what I did, and you can even change the title. Look how cute. I made it custom for our project. So I did a full calendar, and I printed my own. Now, I know a lot of businesses this time of year give away free calendars. You could grab an extra free calendar and stick it in your tote bag and use it for that as well. A lot of like maybe where you go to take your car, or local like small businesses, hair salons, places like that give away free calendars this time of year. So what I do is, so our squares, let me just grab one over here as an example, and we're going to learn how to make our square in part 2 of this crochet along, which will happen, that video will be coming out tomorrow. But each one of our squares is going to have 2 colors. So the center will be the high of the day, and the second round will be the low of the day. So really quick, super easy to whip up. And I have made a few already because we are in the second week of January. I can make a few at a time. So maybe you wait till the weekend and make a few. Maybe you like to make one each day. Maybe you like to wait till the end of the month and make all of them. But as the each day happens, I go through and I jot down the high / low, and I correspond it using my chart to the color. So this one was one of the ones, because we had a long run of these. The high corresponded to spring green, and the low corresponded to aqua. So this is the square that I came up with. Now if we go back to our chart, we're going to be doing the join as you go part in white. So, but I just wanted to show you as an example one of the squares. So I've done a couple of the squares, and in our tutorial part, we're going to be tackling the next one on my calendar here. Okay? Now, now some of you who are math wizards may have noticed there are 365 days in a year, which would give us an odd number of our graph. Okay? So, I had to come up with a grid that was 378 squares. So that means we have a few extra squares. Now, what do you do with those few extra squares? So let me just explain what I mean. We have 18 squares across, and we have 21 squares down, and that will represent one day for every day of the year. However, we're going to have 13 extra squares. How do we deal with that? Well, my idea was that we start with, now let me grab that one, and I'll show you my bin in just a minute that I'm grabbing this stuff out of, because that's a great way to stay organized too. I thought that the first day of the year we could do solid white, and I indicated that with white. Now remember, the join as you go is done in white, so it'll match. So the first day of the year is also the first day of the month. So for every first day of the month, we're going to do a solid white square. So this won't count as the first day here. I did that with the temperature, but because you're not going to do it to count as the first, it'll be to start the new month. So it'll almost be like a marker. So when you look at your blanket, you'll have your marker to start the month, and then you'll go through first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so forth. Then when the next month flips over to February, you'll do another white marker square, and then start February 1st, February 2nd, February 3rd. And as we make this bigger and bigger, you know, you can have more of a visual of what we're doing. So this indicates January, then we'll hook the next square onto that, then we'll hook the next square onto that, and so forth. Now in the tutorial part, you're going to see all this kind of come to life, okay? So we're going to indicate that with a W on our chart, and you can also indicate it on your calendar as well. So this is me. I like to be organized. I like to have charts and things to mark off as I go. I really like checking things off of lists and things. So this kind of like fits in with how I like to approach projects. Some of you might just look at the forecast, crochet it up, stick it on your blanket, you know, with the join as you go, make the next one, and so forth. I like to have charts. That's just me. So obviously it's your project. You can do it any way you like. One more thing I wanted to mention when we were talking about the blanks, the white squares that we're going to be doing at the beginning of each month, we're also going to do one at the end of the year. So because I said we had 13 extra squares, I forgot to mention that part. So we'll do a white square at the beginning of every month to mark a new month, and then to finish up the year, we'll also with that one extra, because there's only 12 months in a year, but we have 13 squares. So we'll do one at the beginning and one at the end, and then one at the beginning of each month as well. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that as well. Okay, so for the last part, we're going to make the little chart that has the yarn on it with the colors. Now, if you remember, if you did the temperature shawl with us, you'll remember this little tool that I used. And when we did the temperature shawl project, I had a lot of folks ask me how I made it. So I figured I'd show you also. So I printed one out, and if you notice, I wanted to make it bigger this year, and I did it in bold. This is just a simple, like on a spreadsheet, 3 columns, 1 blank for the yarn. We're going to punch some holes in it, as you can see here. 1 for the numbers, 1 for the names of the yarn. And I use the names of the yarn, not just blue, green, yellow. I use the name of the yarn. Okay, so grab some scissors and just cut your chart out. Now, you don't have to be fancy like this one. You could just grab some markers and color in the squares. Or you could just have your yarn in a bin, and it's just designated for your temperature project. But I found that having this was super handy and useful, especially if you work on it maybe once a week or every couple of days. You might forget which color is exactly for which temperature. So you can just cut this out. And I did this and this one on cardstock, and you can see it's held up really well. I mean, it has some kind of folded corners, but it held up really, really well after using it for an entire year. So if you can, try using cardstock. It's helpful. And then you can grab a hole punch and then just do 1 hole in each square, okay? I'm just kind of lining mine up nice and neat. And then we'll put a little sample of yarn on there. And you know, these hand hole punches like this, if you can get one that catches the punched out holes, it makes a lot less mess. Okay, so we went ahead and punched our holes in. This probably took 5 or 10 minutes to make, and then we're going to add the yarn to it, okay? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cut a piece of yarn, and we're going to fold it in half, and that part where you looped over your finger, we're going to put it'll be 2 loops. Put those loops through, just like making fringe. And see how I have it through both loops? Now put the ends through there and pull. Now this is on paper, so you don't want to pull too hard because you'll rip that hole. Okay, just like that. And then we're going to repeat for all the other colors. Okay, so I went ahead and added all the yarn, and it looks flowy and pretty like a unicorn mane. And so now I'm just going to trim it up a little bit because we don't need all this length on here. And as you can see, now we have all the colors nicely laid out as a reference, okay? So just like you're making fringe, just go across and cut your yarn, okay? Just so you have a little reference card. You could cut it shorter than that if you'd like as well, okay? So this is the beginning part of our temperature blanket. Now stay tuned for tomorrow because I'm going to share the video on how to start going with these squares. Now you're going to have two different types of squares when you're making this blanket. You're going to have a 2-color square with the highs and the lows of each day. Now, alternatively, you could just make solid squares and just do the average daily if you don't want to worry about switching colors. I thought it would be kind of fun to show both. But you may have a day where the high and the low may be represented by one color. And remember, our month markers that we're creating are going to be solid white as well. So we're going to need to know how to make a solid granny square in 2 rounds and how to make a multicolor granny square in 2 rounds. So they're very, very similar, but I'm going to show you both versions. There's one slight difference. And then once we get a few squares, I don't normally launch these crochet alongs the first day of the year because I like to have some squares to be able to show you, and you can kind of get going on a couple squares also. But I'm going to also, with our white yarn, we're going to learn how to join them together. So you can start joining them on right away and not have to wait to learn about that part. Okay, so stay tuned for tomorrow. We're going to get right down to the crochet part. And in the meantime, you can refer to my tools on the Fiber Flux blog if you want to just look at this online, or you can feel free to make your own or your own version. If you have a different version you'd like to share with our community, definitely share that as well if you have some ideas. And also be sure and check out the Fiber Flux Ravelry crochet along group. It's a wonderful community of makers. We always have crochet alongs going on. Now, if you do the seasonal crochet alongs, like the spring, the summer, the fall, and the holiday, don't worry, we're still going to have those as well. But I just added the charity one in this year, so we would have a wonderful project to give back to others. Okay, so stay tuned for tomorrow. We're going to get right into the tutorial part next. So once you have everything all laid out and you have your yarn chosen, you've created your tools, now it's time to organize everything. So what I like to do, and I just started doing this recently, is sometimes at like department stores or craft stores, you can find those like plastic units with the drawers in them. I've been getting, I got a couple of them, and I've been designating a drawer. You can see my plastic drawer, 1 drawer per project, and this works perfectly for year-long projects because of the amount of things that you'll need, like all the yarn and all the squares that you're going to end up accumulating in your work in progress blanket, as well as the tools. So what I like to do is take all of my yarn. Now, it's the colder months where I live, so I'm going to put some of this warmer yarn in the bottom and kind of stack it accordingly. And then you can just kind of put it in your bin, and then so all that yarn mess will be nice and neat and put away. And then what you can do is take like your calendar, your charts, anything and everything you might need, and you can tuck them in there as well into your bin. And then any squares that you're working on, you might have loose squares, you might have your blanket that you're joining onto, and you can tuck them in there. Now, if you're really feeling organized, I have lots of different hooks, and I have a couple different eye hooks, and I've designated this particular one for this project. So you could even tuck your hook in there. If you had a little, let's see, if you had a little extra pair of scissors. Now these are my everyday scissors I use for everything, so I probably wouldn't put these in there. But you could even have like a little pair of scissors you could tuck in there, and that way you could put the whole drawer away, and then when you're ready to work on your project, you can just pull the whole drawer out and kind of tote it around your house or what have you. You could also do this with tote bags. You could have a series of tote bags, you know, one for this project, one for your other projects, etc. So I would love to hear how you organize these projects too. Do you use charts and things like this? Do you use calendars? Will you be using a tote or something like that? So leave those in the comments below, and I love hearing the neat ideas that all of you have.